Want to thank everybody for joining us here on the Talk Shop. Today's Candidate Awareness Tour 2026, brought to you in part by Bull Mountain Pharmacy, dedicated to the health and wellness of Southeast Wyoming from their location at 4th and Harney, and the I-80 Towing fans, the i80towing.com, serving Elk Mountain, Cheyenne, and Laramie from their locations at 3830 Cherrywood Loop East in the Gem City. Today's guest, Steve Freeze, today on the Talk Shop. We appreciate you joining us. You're running for Congress. Tell us what is going on. Your family has a tradition of political you aspirations. Your dad, now you, running for Wyoming. Steve, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Eric, thank you so much for the chance to be with you and to talk to folks here. I would actually say that it was never my intention to run for office. My dad had an absolutely fantastic time campaigning for governor, of course, back with Harriet and Sam Galiotis, and Mark Gordon came out the winner of that bout. This was never on my map, to be honest with you. But Kyle True, the True family, was passing through town, and we were talking about some education issues. And we talked about the race, and he told me that he'd asked his family, would they be willing to let him make a run for it? Because there's so many people. I think the reason we have so many entrants in this race is that the people of Wyoming care about the country. We're patriots. So every one of us, I think, believes we can serve the state and represent people well. I think all the other folks in the race want to serve. They want to do something good for the state. I just threw my hat in the ring because as I looked at what experience I had, the experience as a businessman and then as a conservative activist, I just thought I had a lot to offer and could really deliver.
We're visiting with Steve Freeze, running for U.S. Congress, representing the state of Wyoming. One of the most important topics that people want to know about is, what are you going to do for job creation in the state of Wyoming? What do you uniquely offer that no one else in the field has thought of, presented, or can offer the voters of Wyoming?
Thanks, Eric. This is the top priority that I have, and I want to put it in a slightly different frame. It's not the jobs. There's something bigger going on to me. It's family. So I had the joy of raising my kids near my parents, 3 generations together. And from that, you get wisdom passed down, you get family stories and family history. 3 generations praying together at holidays and on Sunday and Christmas, Easter. That's a special thing. And the only way we can really keep that in Wyoming is if there are great jobs for the next generation, so that younger folks aren't moving away for opportunities. We need to have great, high-paying opportunities here so our younger generation can stay here and so that they can move back. So when you look at how those jobs are going to get here, some of the newfangled ideas are certainly worth considering. We'll talk later probably about data centers and the pros and cons there. But look at Wyoming's God-given gifts of coal, oil, natural gas, uranium, and all kinds of rare earth and strategic minerals. These are fantastic jobs. The problem is the federal government is in the way. We have a regulatory system. The Biden administration tried to kill coal. They were doing everything that they could to end coal, stating it out flat. Coal is a fantastic, reliable source of energy. And our coal is so terrific, even the environmentalists will agree, shipping it all the way to Japan for them to use it in their power plants is cleaner, even with what you got to burn to ship it there, than the other coal that they might get from other regions. Our coal is just the cleanest out there. So how do we get the energy and mining jobs here? We need to change regulations. We need to streamline things. We need to not have a permitting process that they can run you around in circles over and over again, with lots of opportunities for radical environmentalists to sue and freeze your projects. That's the kind of thing we need to kind of tidy up. We need some new thinking about that. And the reason that I know I can have an impact on the regulatory system is that I already have. Before President Trump was even nominated, I pulled a team of attorneys together in DC, and we crafted a variety of executive orders. One of them people heard a lot about because President Trump kind of marketed it. He called it 2 for 1. He said, I'll repeal 2 regulations for every one that I pass. But what we gave him was a more powerful tool. Our executive order said to every agency, if you want to pass a regulation, and they all have a cost associated with them. So if the price tag for putting this new regulation on is $100 million, you have to pay for it by repealing $100 million of regulation. At the end of his first administration, he repealed 7 regulations for every new one that he passed. And that taught me a few things. You know, a lot of times the laws that get passed, they're a little bit vague. So those go then to the agencies to write the regulations. Sometimes the regulations stay a little bit vague, and you have another category of government document called guidance that tells you how you're supposed to interpret the regulation that was kind of vague. So what I realized is that sometimes you don't need to change the law if you can change the regulation. Sometimes you don't even need to change the regulation if you can change the guidance. And the key is, and what I'm going to be doing is going around the state and meeting with our small producers and larger producers, with our mining hopefuls, with investors. What's the low-hanging fruit? What are the 2, 3, 4, 5 regulations that if we switched them around, put them in a different order, or simplified things that were duplicative, you could put more people to work? That'll be the first priority. And then also, we're going to be looking at bigger ways to rethink how the process even works. You know, there's one thing that I know about government programs is as they continue, they get barnacles on them and barnacles on top of barnacles. And people never really look at how do we cut through this and make a fresh start on the whole process. President Trump has put in place a cabinet of all stars that want to see the cost of living and go down, for affordability to go up across the whole country. And the bedrock cost of everything that we do and consume is energy. And if we can unleash that potential in Wyoming by rethinking some of our regulatory processes, we're going to have great jobs here that can keep families together. And we're also going to be benefiting our entire country. All of America is going to benefit as Wyoming thrives and drives its energy jobs. I'm sure you heard that the president has made big moves on coal, including taking steps to drive a West Coast deepwater port to export our coal. That's going to be a fight, but he's leaning hard into that. The thing we need right after that and right alongside it is a West Coast LNG port so that our natural gas has another market. With those 2 things in place and a streamlining of regulations, we're going to have some great jobs here. We're going to have families be able to stay. And because when you have great jobs in energy, that means you've got great jobs for home builders. You've got great jobs for people that, are helping them selling them cars. You've got great jobs for people in real estate. You've got great jobs for doctors, hospital people. With more people earning more money, everybody wins.
We're visiting with Steve Friese, running for U.S. Congress in the state of Wyoming, for Wyoming in the federal government. And one of the things you mentioned comes to mind is the ports of America, East and West Coast. What do you identify has been the reason why we do not already have these necessary ports for America's viability in international trade?
The number one reason we aren't exporting coal now out of the West Coast ports is that the radical environmentalist movement, they've pulled a fast one on the American public. They've got far too many people in the country and policymakers under the impression that carbon dioxide is a pollutant. It is not a pollutant. It is the basic core of life. Carbon dioxide is plant food. It's what makes plants grow. It's what makes them green, and it's how we get our oxygen. So telling us all that carbon dioxide was a pollutant, that's just a red herring. Now, let's be clear. When you do burn coal, there are other pollutants that you've got to screen out for and filter. There's mercury, there's a lot of stuff. You've got to do this the right way with scrubbers on your smokestack. Burning coal itself produces pollution, but carbon dioxide is not that pollution. So, with that philosophy in place that they have to stop all kinds of, anything that produces carbon dioxide, they've brainwashed people into thinking that coal shouldn't be burned at all. And so the environmentalists that are in the West Coast states, they push back and put a hard block on all of these projects. They're even shutting their own coal plants, which, you know, we're not there yet with solar and wind. We don't yet have the battery technology necessary to make those reliable and viable. But we have coal now that can power us to the future where we can develop those new technologies.
Is Wyoming negotiating well enough for itself and the citizens in the state of Wyoming with the rates that are charged to energy companies in severance taxes, or do you think that's more of a state issue than a federal issue and something you're not comfortable speaking to?
Eric, this is something that I'm learning about every day. I've had conversations with our governor. I know that it's my understanding that in the big beautiful bill there was a reduction in some of the royalties that we received. I'm going to be taking a hard look at that to see if that was a misstep or something that needs correction, because I want to assure that as we mine the coal and drill for the gas and oil, that we're getting our share of those severance taxes. I understand there was a reduction. I don't know if that's temporary, but that's something I'll be looking at. A bigger problem is that we don't have long enough time horizons for some of these coal leases. I'm told that in 2030 we start to run up against a wall where if we don't have new leases and new areas where we can be mining coal, we're gonna start, having a diminishing return. So it's important that we expand some of those opportunities as we look at public lands.
When it comes to public lands, the big rage in Wyoming tends to be public lands in public hands. Your position with respect to this topic?
I'm in agreement on that topic. I think we've got to have a multi-use approach to our lands. I'm not in favor of a willy-nilly fire sale of federal lands to solve the budgetary problems in Washington. I don't think that's a sound answer. But I am open to things like land swaps. You're probably aware that as the railroads went west, they developed a checkerboard pattern of private land that was deeded to homesteaders and then state and federal lands that were retained. You know, there's certainly opportunities where some of those swaps could be made between a private landowner and a federal landowner, where you could imagine if you would, if you've got every other checkerboard there, but you could consolidate a few, be able to, herd your cattle more effectively. You might get access to better water in that fashion. I'm open to swaps where there's a win-win for people in the state. But as far as the fire sale things of just selling everything off, I'm not for that at all. Although people should be aware that the Department of Interior and the BLM, they have a schedule of sales for properties all across the country. I mean, public land is sold and has been for since the beginning, and so it's not as if it never happens. But so people need to keep that in mind that land sales do occur. But I wasn't for some of the aggressive proposals that I think were floated in Congress recently. We've got
Across
we.
our, Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we not just for our tourism industry, but outfitters are a substantial contributor to our culture, our way of life. What a wonderful thing to offer visitors from other states and around the world. Our outfitters have a great opportunity to use again for these public lands, and it would get complicated if parcels started getting sold off that would make their life more difficult. So that's something special we have that I want to see protected.
Imagine if in 1943 John Rockefeller Jr. had not succeeded with the Snake River Land Company in donating what is the largest mass of land to what is today known as Grand Teton National Park, and had FDR not accepted that and made it happen. They tried for 15 years to maintain the beauty of tourism, an iconic tourism element in Wyoming. What's your that tends to transition towards data centers, Steve, as we consider what's the right thing to do with Wyoming land.
I'm happy to talk about data centers, although that is something that won't really be the purview of a congressperson. That's something that the governor and the state legislature will be making the decisions about. So
Well,
I'm
it's
not.
interesting that you mentioned that. I would interject, given last week's news, one of our federal representatives has initiated the conversation to introduce a bill where federal government would supersede states' authority over data center locating in the state, specifically in Laramie County and Cheyenne, Wyoming area. Your thoughts as you continue without interruption. I apologize.
Yes, no, I welcome that. This is a back and forth. That's how people are going to get to know me. You know what? It's got to be a two-way communication, and that's why I'm enjoying getting around the state so much, where I can talk with folks. So I haven't seen the text of that bill, but that doesn't sound like the right thing to me. The local community's got to be able to make these decisions, because there are two key things we want to protect with data centers. But first, let's say why we want to look at participating. We're patriots that know we are in an arms race with China. The one that best perfects and advances AI is going to be the winner. So we know that we've got a role to play there, or a duty to consider how can we help. The second is that, what they're getting from us is they're buying, we used to sell coal, right? But now we're selling cold. It's nice to be able to cash in on cold, isn't it? What a great thing. But there are two key things we've got to keep in mind. The first is these companies that are investing, they have raised a ton of money. They're very profitable. They have a lot of money. They cannot be driving up our local electricity rates. We cannot allow that. So I'm excited that some of them are looking at developing their own energy sources right there, their own generating plants. Let them use our natural gas. Let them use our coal. Let's have power plants right here to power those data centers, because in the perfect outcome, they'd be able to sell surplus into the local grid and drive our prices down. That's what we should be negotiating for. So that's the key thing, protecting and even lowering our electricity bills. The second thing we've got to be very careful about is water. We're in a drought situation all over the state. I've been told right here in Casper that there are some cattlemen who are selling calves because they're too worried there's not going to be enough grass for them. And that's just a situation that says we've got to be really careful about water. So as I understand, they're pushing more and more for closed loop system. Here's the allotment that you get. You got to recycle it and clean it yourself. You can't be draining our aquifers for your data centers. And the second thing would be that that's the thing. It's a closed loop system and the power. That's the thing. But if you've been watching some of the things that Elon Musk is talking about, there's a chance some of his technology might leapfrog all of this. He says that a solar panel in space is 5 times more efficient. So I think before we know it, he's going to have data centers as orbiting satellites. They get them in a stationary orbit where they're always pointing at the sun. They're getting all that energy. And then the backside in the shade, that's able to cool the chips off so they don't even need the water. So stay tuned. Let's watch that, because there's a chance that some of this technology might even leapfrog some of the build out. And we might not be, we'll have a couple data centers, but if he can do that at a lower cost, that's where it's going to go. The economics are going to drive that.
How do you feel about community partner agreements that some communities are examining and looking to implement that include not only the topics you've mentioned, but also cleanup aspects that would be required, and in some cases negotiated amenities that communities might derive from entering business developers?
We ought to negotiate the best deal we can get. I'm all for that. As I understand it, a lot of these wind projects went up, and some of them are now, they've got to be repaired, replaced. I'm told we've got landfills full of these blades that I guess wear out at a certain point, and they're very almost impossible to recycle. So I don't think that, I think that in some of those, the wind lease agreements, there should have been some cleanup funds built into those. And I think we're getting smarter about this. Those community agreements sound terrific. We've got something to offer them, and they should be willing to provide what our communities want.
Steve Freeze, Republican for Congress, defending Wyoming is your noted campaign materials, fighting for America. And as a Trump conservative, you talk about security on the border. You want to expand on that for our listeners?
Absolutely. Well, it's very clear that what the Democrat now it's becoming the Democrat Socialist Party. Their clear intention was to flood the country with illegals, figure out a way to get them to vote, and then give them lots of free stuff, and then they'd have a dependent class of people that would vote to keep them in power forever. It's pretty clear that's what their intention was. When you look at all the ways that they fight against voter security, we need the Save America Act. We need to know that everyone who's voting has a right to vote. Now, let's understand how complicated they've made this. I've lost count of the more than a handful of states that were giving licenses, driver's licenses, to people that were not citizens. They moved to another state. They've got a license they use as an ID to get a new license. We've kind of lost track of where along the way did they ever prove if they're a citizen or not. So we've got a mess to untangle there. Let's look even deeper at that. If we don't have a border, we don't have a nation anymore. And I really applaud President Trump's ability to build that wall, to provide the security, and drop the illegal immigration to just a trickle from what it once was. That's an amazing accomplishment, and that he did it so quickly. We've got to be aware that it's easy to think right now, because President Trump has pushed back so well on, we're getting men out of women's sports, right? We're getting some of these things that were so illogical pushed back, and we can kind of feel comfortable like that's been taken care of. I need to remind the people of Wyoming that the people that are pushing all those radical agendas, they are waiting for their opportunity. They are on the rise. We now have 5 Democratic Socialists of America entering Congress, and in the next cycle, that could double. The Democratic Party is not your grandfather's Bill Clinton Democrat Party. It's a whole different animal now. It's a Kamala Democrat. It's an Ilhan Omar Democrat. They do not have the best interest of our country at heart, and they do not understand common sense values that every person in Wyoming has. So they've already told us that if they can get back in power, they're going to add 2 more states. They're going to turn Puerto Rico into a state and Washington, D.C. into a state, giving them 4 more senators. They're going to pack the Supreme Court with as many judges as they need till they start getting things going their way. Our liberties are under attack. We're just in this wonderful moment of pause where this president is taking every action that he can against that. But we're going to need people in D.C. that are going to continue that battle. President Trump's got 2 more years. After that, we've got to be sure that Wyoming sends someone to D.C. that can work with other patriots collaboratively to fight against the left.
What's working against President Trump with respect to following through on lowering groceries, lowering taxes in America, according to your perspective?
You know, a fascinating thing. I'd invite folks to read. There was a autobiography, so to speak, of Dick Cheney, and I don't know how many people remember the IBM Selectric 2. It was the first typewriter that had a backspace that erased. It
Hmm.
popped up a little piece of film that took that off. So he talks about in the Nixon administration, he was hammering out price and wage controls. And in the book, he talks very clearly how that didn't work. So we want the president to advance his agenda, but let's understand he can't start setting price and wage controls because that's been demonstrated again and again. It's like squeezing a balloon. The problem comes out somewhere else. You can't just lower the prices by executive order. That's not what an executive order is for. What's going to drive affordability is decreasing the cost of energy. We're I think all of us are pleased that Iran has now been defeated as a nuclear power. They've united. The whole Middle East has changed because as we went in to remove that threat, Iran decided to attack its neighbors, which we who could have seen that coming? The other Gulf states are now strongly advocating that we help finish the job there because they recognize Iran as a threat to themselves. So we've got to get through this difficult price. Of course, as the supply of oil was squeezed there, that's going to drive up gas prices. We're already seeing. I was in Casper last week. Gas prices have dropped in a week or in the last 10 days. It's going in the right direction. I've got more confidence that President Trump can negotiate a deal. It's going to take a while, but I see us returning to a state where energy prices start settling down, gas prices come down, and we're going to get prices back down as well. You know, the real issue, the real issue that's driving a lot of the cost rises of everything is that our federal government is spending too much and taxing too much and inflating the currency. You know, that's the number one driver of inflation is the expanded government spending and all the bailouts that have been happening. Uh, it- reining that in, reining that in is what's going to bring more sanity. I'm very excited about his latest appointment to the Federal Reserve, Kevin Warsh. Uh, I've met him a few times. He's a no nonsense guy, and he gave an interesting speech the other day that he said he does not believe, as past Fed chairmen have done, that there's a direct trade-off between lower interest rates and unemployment. You know, he believes we can thread the needle and we can get interest rates down without expanding unemployment. He's got a different take on things that's exciting in terms of what the opportunities are for the country going forward. I think the best is yet to come. These could be two fantastic more years of the Trump administration. I'm optimistic things are going to keep moving in the right direction.
What can be done to protect Social Security in your eyes forever forward? Seems like this is a revolving door of consideration and concern, primarily to our elderly.
Absolutely. So as a congressperson, I would never vote for the reduction in benefits to current people that are receiving them because too many people are just relying on that, you know, and these were promises that were made when people paid into the system that they would have this benefit at the other side. So for existing folks receiving those benefits and people close to retirement, that's a non-negotiable for me. As I understand it, to keep the system robust, we may be looking at folks that are entering the system, whether it's going to mean, 30 years from now, moving back the retirement age a few years. There's a lot of math involved in that. I'm learning about it. Those are going to be the kind of proposals that people are going to need to look at. I'm also curious about how at the high end, when people are, I'm 60, so I'm not far away from being eligible for Social Security, but I helped build a successful business. I've got some money in the bank. I just wonder, are we ever going to look at a point where uh, folks can folks can, what do you say, sort of cap out? If you've got X in resources, should you really be drawing that down? I've never seen the math on how that works out, but that's certainly something, you know, I should not be drawing Social Security when I hit the age. And I wonder if there aren't ways to look at how might that change the equation if there were folks at a certain level of material wealth, they were opted out of the system. I haven't looked at those numbers yet, but I think that's something to consider as well.
You talk about being
I hope it's not too controversial to think that a rich guy maybe shouldn't get checks from the government. I hope that's not controversial.
what tell us what the Freeze family story is. Where have you come from? Where are you going? And what does it mean to be family oriented in the Freeze family?
Wow, what a great question. Well, lots of folks met my dad when he was running for governor. Some, as that 7 years ago. He's been gone for 5 years, 5 years and 2 weeks, and a few weeks. We miss him every day. So my mom and dad moved to the East Coast. He finished 2 years of military service, and he had $800 of accumulated leave pay, a station wagon. My older sister and I was on the way. So that was their starting point. He got a job with a family that was investing, had a seat on the stock exchange. 10 years after that, he launched out on his own. And he was one of the great growth stock pickers of the 80s and 90s. He had mutual funds called the Brandywine funds. And for several rolling 10-year periods, they were the class leader in growth stock, no load mutual funds. And that was a fantastic time. So it's important to know that the big success there really didn't happen until I was, a young adult coming of age. So I grew up with in modest circumstances. I was working hard cutting lawns and bussing tables, and I sold Cutco knives as a high schooler. Uh, so I know the value of hard work. Some of my opponents have tried to make up a story that I've been born with a silver spoon in my mouth, and I think it was more like that plastic spork from Kentucky Fried Chicken. You remember those?
I do.
Uh, I had a simple life growing up, but then, yes, by the time I came out of college, things were going gangbusters, and I had the joy of helping to build that business. Fascinating experience. So we were investing in dynamic American companies primarily that were making products people wanted. They were expanding their hiring. I remember meeting Michael Dell of Dell Computer when he was, I think, 24 years old, and he was raising another round of investment for his company, and he came into our office. They were exciting times. One of my stocks the first stock that I got into our portfolio for our investors, the PCs had just gotten into everybody's office across the country. And what people found out was if there was ever a glitch or a hiccup in your power, the computer would crash and you could lose data. So do you remember these kind of bricks on the ground, these backup battery supplies you'd plug into? Well, you have this huge installed base of computers without this backup battery. So that was a company we invested in. They just went gangbusters. I think that was a triple for our clients. That was a real win. Um, so it was an exciting time to watch that build. But then my dad, we came to the decision that we had other values really beyond accumulating wealth. We sold the company, and we got very interested in just really fighting for America, preserving America. And so we invested in a lot of kind of bedrock conservative institutions. Maybe one of the key among those was Tea Party Patriots. We helped raise the first $1 million that launched that organization, and they are still going strong. In fact, when I was considering whether I wanted to put my hat in the ring for this, I turned on the television, and there's Speaker Mike Johnson pushing the Save America Act. Standing right behind him was Jenny Beth Martin of Tea Party Patriots. So she had gone from a young woman rallying the troops that were, really raising concerns about these government bailouts of banks that had made risky investments, and now there she is fighting for America for the Save Act. And that made me think, okay, here's something that I want to do. I've got to be part of that. She's still there. I've got to do that. And then just got to tell you too, I'm a huge fan. I was scrolling through along as we do. I think I was pumping gas, and up came a reel of this young congressman in Texas, Brandon Gill. Have you seen him in action?
I haven't.
He is, you got to look him up. Brandon Gill from Texas. The way he interrogates these people that are ripping the country off, it's astonishing. It's jaw-dropping. And I just looked at this and I thought, pardon my French, hell yeah. I want to work with that guy. He's a fighter. He knows what this country needs. I want to be right alongside him. I'm probably not going to be somebody that's looking to get in front of the cameras. I'm going to be more behind the scenes, trying to work with the policy wonks to get the regulations changed. But I'm excited about some of the new people in Congress. At the same time, I'm terrified now, as I mentioned, there are now 5 Democratic Socialists of America heading to Congress, and more are on the way. There is a serious battle to be engaged. But you asked me about my family. As the success came, after we sold the company and we started funding different conservative groups, my dad would always say, to those who much has been given, much is expected. That's a bedrock principle in our family. A bedrock principle. Another one of his favorite Bible verses was, when we carry the burdens of others, we fulfill the law of Christ. So I look at, and he also had another funny one. He was a very generous man. He never was a billionaire, but he did give away $500 million in his lifetime. Imagine that. And he always had a funny line he would say when he made a big gift to somebody or to an organization. He'd say, you know what, you're just lucky that I realized this isn't my money. If it was mine, you wouldn't get 1 red cent. He'd say, but this is God's money. We're stewards. And he didn't, as I say, he gave away a lot of money. I'm comfortable, but somebody started saying, you're a rich guy. Well, you know what? I'm not Lamborghini rich. I'm not Rolex rich, but I'm Costco rich. You know what I mean? I can buy what I want at Costco. That's a pretty great place to be, and my kids, I'll be able to put them through college. What a wonderful position to be in. But I'm not going to Washington to make money. I'm going because it's deep within me to serve. It's deep within me to put my talents and my skills and my time to help others. And the number one way I want to do that, again, I care about generations being together. I like grandparents to have grandchildren on their knee. And the way I see that we can get that is with more great jobs in the state. And the way we get those great jobs is by changing regulations to drive our extractive industries.
When President Trump made the decision to support individual states making their own decisions on abortion in America, where do you stand specifically with that action?
Well, I'm thrilled that he was able to nominate justices to the Supreme Court that recognize that nowhere in the Constitution is a right to abortion guaranteed or even provided for. If you go back and read the original decision, they came up with all kinds of crazy language that this was a liberty found in the penumbras of the Constitution. Do you know what a penumbra is? That's when
I'd have to say no, Steve.
Okay, well, here, just to show you how out of this world their thinking was, okay? When there's a solar eclipse and you see the rays of light outside of the thing, so that's the penumbra light, okay? So they're saying that the Constitution is right there in the middle, but out here radiating from it is somehow the right to an abortion. Give me a break. Literally, penumbras. So it's fantastic that he had justices who realized, according to the Constitution, that's the kind of decision that belongs to the states. That's a great place for it to be. My personal view, I think everybody wants to know. My personal view is very much grounded in my faith. And, I really think my life didn't really begin. Sorry, I get a little choked up here. I don't feel like my life really began till I moved to Wyoming. I found the Lord. I was baptized in the Shoshone River, and this is my home. And I know that we are magically and beautifully made in the womb. Life begins at conception, and I'm for protecting that life. And and I'm actually in the camp of no exceptions. But it's not going to be me making that policy decision. It's up to the state. I just want people to know where my heart is. I've met people, and as horrible and unthinkable it is to imagine someone surviving an assault and having a child, but I've met people that were products of that. That they were a child produced by rape, and they were some fantastic people. And I find it. I'm going to sound a little old school on this one, but if we're going to talk about ending a life, maybe it ought to be the life of that rapist, rather than. I know I'm maybe not in everybody's camp on that. And again, I'm not going to be the one making these decisions. It's now up to the states. But just so you know where my heart is, I'm for life. I'm for the unborn. I think life is sacred, and it means a lot to me. I've been endorsed by the several right to life groups. I meet all their check all their boxes. It's important to me. Life is sacred. There's a
Where do you
reason. There's in the Declaration, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life comes first for a reason, and I'll be protecting it in Congress.
where do you stand with respect to probably one of the most popular amendments to talk about after free speech, Second Amendment right to bear arms?
Yeah, I have a lot of fun talking about the gun law that I want to pass. Don't people want a lot of gun laws? Okay, here's my gun law. Here's the one I'd be willing to see pass. I would like to see all pistol and rifle manufacturers have threaded barrels so we can put suppressors on everything. That's the one gun law I'm for. So to be clear, I'm not for any of the gun laws that are out there now. I'm not for any of the proposals that are out there. The Second Amendment is not, as the liberals will tell you, so that people can go deer hunting. And it's not so that you can protect yourself from a home invader, although both of those are logical and clear uses. The reason we have the Second Amendment is to protect ourselves against tyranny and a tyrannical government. It's literally there so that if our government becomes tyrannical, we have the ability to overthrow that government by force if necessary. That's why it's there. That's why the founders put it there, so that we would not be an enslaved people. Every time a socialist government takes over, one of the first things they do is they take away everybody's guns. It's just what they do. Then they know that their power will be secure. They'll never face an uprising. If the people of Iran had a Second Amendment, I don't think they would have stayed under the despotic rule of that radical, regime that's got them all under their thumb. The Second Amendment is there to preserve our liberties, and I'll defend it in Congress.
You speak in your campaign materials about term limits. Would you be specific with respect to your ideas surrounding term limits?
Here's what I think. I don't think the founders intended this to be, I don't think they ever envisioned that anyone would become a career politician, running for office their whole life and making it a career. I think that what the founders intended was that people who had invested in life, that had built a business, that had raised a family, that had some insight and wisdom and a little gray hair, would be able to take that wisdom and insight and serve and represent their people in Congress, not for a continual lifetime. More than the term limits, I'm more interested in seeing that there's some kind of mental acuity test. Remember when they forced President Trump to take a test? Isn't it interesting that they never asked that of Joe Biden when he was in there, when he was clearly enfeebled, clearly incapacitated and clearly incapable of, finishing a sentence sometimes. I'm more interested that we maybe have some kind of test that you've got to be able to, you've got to be able to string a thought together. You've got to be able to show that you're mentally there and can serve your people, and you're not just being led around by your staff and they're the ones making all their decisions. But I believe that, in a sense, we have term limits because we can vote people out of office. But I have signed the term limit pledge, which I believe it states that if a term limits proposal is advanced as a law, I would be in support of it.
I think one of the more interesting pieces in your campaign materials that I want to give you an opportunity to speak to the audience about is in respect to banning congressional trading in
Eric,
commodities.
Eric, I was in the investment business. Right now, these guys, Nancy Pelosi goes into a meeting, and because of what they're going to decide to put in that bill, she knows when that news gets out, that stock's going up. She walks out of that meeting, goes down her hall. I don't know if she calls her broker or logs into her Ameritrade account or something and types in her order, and the stock goes up the next day, and she's made money, and they allow that. If she stopped down the hall and made a phone call to you or to me, we'd be breaking the law. That's trading on inside information. It makes no sense to me that this is allowed. I absolutely want it to stop. It's an insult to me as someone who did all the hard work of, we didn't use inside information. We would call competitors, suppliers, customers. We would figure out how is their business doing relative to their customers, how is their to their competitors, and we would make this complicated decision based on all these factors. It was hard work to just get one tip that is going to make a stock go up based on inside information like that you've even made. You've even changed the law to benefit the company whose stock you're investing in. This has to change.
Insider trading is already against the law. How do we make laws more holding people more accountable?
This actually, you said it right there. They can't be under a different legal system than we are. So as all of my trade, I kind of had a cheeky idea once that what if I create a little fund? I ask for donors and we get, $1 million together, and I just make every inappropriate illegal trade there, and we see how big it can get. And then maybe I'll donate it to charities across Wyoming. I thought about doing that. It sounded kind of interesting, but then I thought, you know what? That's not real work. That would be a distraction. I've got more important things to do than that. This is a terrible process that has to stop. You can't even. I don't understand it. I believe it was taken out and then they snuck it back into something. We got to get rid of that.
We're visiting with Steve Friese, candidate on the Republican ticket for U.S. Congress. And one of the last questions we have for you today, sir, is with respect to restoring or creating trust in the United States government worldwide.
Worldwide. Well, I think first we have to start at home. I think there are far too many of us across this state and conservatives across the country that are waiting for some kind of accountability for the things that went on during the Biden and Obama years. The wheels of justice are grinding a little too slow, I think, for all of us. There are ongoing things still that somebody's got to be held accountable for the vindictive and illegitimate way that they tried to put President Trump in jail, for the crimes that they concocted that were non-crimes, for the entire Russia hoax, which the more we learn, the more information that's released, the more we can see that there's a criminal element. There's a criminal left that's entrenched in Washington that's got to be rooted out. Across the world, I think we are trusted. I think the folks that are questioning some of what we're doing, they don't know which end is up. I just had friends return from London. Uh, First of all, they're sweltering with all their green energy plans. They don't have air conditioning places. My wife was at a seminar. There were 4,000 people in this giant facility. Every single one of them with a fan and rolling down their socks. They've put in these green energy policies that have led them astray. But more importantly, they've had this overwhelming immigration of from North African countries, of people with the of the Islamic faith, that fundamentally it's a culture that's not very compatible with the freedom and ideals of America. I'm very worried about the growing attempts to impose Sharia law. There are whole communities in Texas where they tried to say that if you bought into this community as a Muslim, you couldn't sell your house unless it was to another Muslim, because they're trying to build this block of power and they want to have their own system of laws that would be separate from ours. It's the at a certain level, the Muslim faith, it is also a political ideology that I don't think in that instance of it is really compatible with American society. This isn't the case for all, but these are the adherents of Sharia law. So what I was going to say was that England has allowed this immigration to occur that is changing the nature of their country. It's changing the nature of how they're going to be functioning in the years ahead, um, and we don't want to go there. I don't think anybody in Wyoming wants to see us turn into a third world country, and that's what I'll be fighting for.
Steve Freeze, our guest today on the Candidate Awareness Tour 2026. This is the Talk Shop, and it's brought to you today by Wyoming Fudge Company in Gillette, Wyoming. That sweet product available in America's 250th year, right here, celebrated from the great state of Wyoming. That's Wyoming Fudge Company. Steve, thank you for your time and investment. You have dedicated your time to our program today, and you probably brought a great deal of other topics that might be important to Wyoming. We didn't cover them. This is your opportunity. Touch on those if you don't mind in your final comment for our program.
Thanks, Eric. I just like to conclude by saying that what I care about most is people here in the state. What I care about are families being able to stay together for multi generations. And what that means to me, the role that I can play there to make that happen, is to drive our energy industries by changing regulations in Washington, fixing things at BLM and EPA so that we can have more great jobs here and families can stay together. That's going to be my scorecard. How many new great jobs came to the state? And I don't think you can track how many families stayed here, but I'll know that because they'll vote to keep me in next time.
Thank you for your time. How do people get engaged with more detail on your campaign? Where do you like them to reach out and answer their calls, their texts, their questions by email, or what
Well,
mechanism?
I have a website. If you send an email to info at FRIESSFORWY.com, info at freezeforwyoming.com. Now, when you say freeze, people put the E first. It's not that way. It's like French fries with two S's. Info at freeze.com. I want to send you a bumper sticker, and I'll send you a personal note of thanks. I want to send everybody a bumper sticker. But also the website is freeze4wy.com. Learn about all my positions. Ask me questions. I want to engage the state. I'm traveling all over the place. Come out and see me. Say hello. I want to work for you. I want to serve this state. I want to help preserve Trump's legacy. I want to return the feel-good optimism of the Reagan years, the happy warrior. You got to fight for things, but you can't always do it in a combative way. I want to get down there to Washington, be persuasive, convincing, and push back gently but firmly against the rising left and these democratic socialists. That Wyoming owes it to the country to send somebody there that's going to do that job. And I hope you'll trust me. On August 18th.
Early
With your
voting
vote.
begins. Early voting begins July 21st. Everybody, get your early votes in beginning July 21st through August 18th. That primary election in the state of Wyoming. Most important that you go to the polls informed. The best vote is an informed vote, and we appreciate Steve Freeze for you bringing your campaign through our classroom. The campaign trail runs through the Talk Shop classroom, and you have joined us in Studio 255 via Zoom today, and we can't be more grateful for you and sharing the awareness of your campaign ideas and perspectives to our people in the great state of Wyoming. Thank you, and come again soon.
Thank you. Anytime, Eric. I'm grateful for the opportunity. Look forward to it. See you around.